Yeah, it's great to be speaking with you.
Thanks.
I spent yesterday rereading some of your classic little stories. Vader. And this one was really exciting, even though it's more for a younger audience. There's still plenty to enjoy as a DC fan. So I had a great time reading it, and so thank you so much for spending some time talking to me about
Yeah,
it. And I can't wait to dive into it.
thanks.
Um, Looking at the kind of the DC aspect of it, and especially how Batman is as a character, and how Robin is as a character, or Damian. What was it like, sort of opening the world up of the DC universe to a younger audience?
Yeah, I mean that's it's one of the exciting things I think about DC the last few years is their like the number of really good young reader graphic novels. Um, and especially, having like an 8-year-old. So it's nice to have comics that like he can read and I can read. Um and I always approach writing for kids as you don't need to write down to them.
Yeah,
Like I kind of write for myself, and if there's anything that the editors feel like doesn't fit the age of the like target audience, then they can let me know and I can adjust. But um so I always, try to make it something that's, you know, entertaining for me as much as it would be for, my kids. And um with Batman especially, I I think the fun thing was, there's all kinds of different takes on Batman over the years. And so my take was um letting Batman be the comic relief in a way,
yeah.
and having it be where you're seeing Batman as kind of the goofy, uncool dad through Damian's eyes.
It worked really well. There was some and like you said, it was interesting to see Batman in sort of like the comedic, um, sort of the embarrassing dad sort of thing. And I feel like that's a light that we've never really seen Batman in. Um, so it was really refreshing to see that, especially with kind of like recent iterations of Batman, which have been a lot grittier and darker.
Hmm.
It was nice to have a Batman that was more kind of appealing, I guess,
Hmm.
especially for younger audiences as well. Um, and I think a lot of people are going to like that. But I really did like what we said, where you're not talking down to them, especially for the kids. You're not talking down to them at all. And I feel like a lot of people will be able to enjoy this, even if they don't have kids, or if they're reading it to their children, they can still take something from it, and still have fun with it. I mean, there are moments I really, really chuckled at. There were some really great moments in there that I absolutely loved. Um, so looking at this project, how did Batman and Robin and Howard come about?
Yeah, so it started the idea. So DC had asked me if, when they started, the push for all these books for younger readers, they were, inviting various established authors and cartoonists and people who maybe hadn't done like, your normal superhero DC comics before. And I didn't really like I knew right away. So Batman was always my favorite DC hero, and so I knew, I was like, oh, I'd like to do something with Batman, but I didn't really have a Batman story sitting, on the shelf waiting to tell. Um, but I had this other idea that was kind of a high school rivalry story, and the basic idea was, like the all-star student at the school, like he's like the most popular kid, the captain of the football team, um, and the new kid shows up, and this all-star kid thinks he's going to show the new kid around and take him under his wing, and it turns out the new kid is like even more popular, even smarter, even more athletic. um, and so, kind of having this student who is used to being the best suddenly, having to deal with being second best. And so that was kind of the genesis. And I realized, um, Robin being Batman's sidekick, but I could make it Damian Wayne, so it's Batman, Bruce Wayne's son, and um, fit him into that one side of that high school rivalry. And then Howard, of course, was the character I came up with to be the other side. And it just really came naturally from there. It was really kind of um, the story. One of the reasons I'd never done anything with that idea was like I didn't know, other than that kind of basic idea, I didn't really have any hook to it. And as soon as I put Robin in it, it just all came together and kind of really built naturally from there.
I think as well, that story of the relationship between Damien and Howard, it seems and felt very universal. So kind of struggles that maybe some of us face as kids. We're all good at something, but then someone comes up and they're better at it, and it's these little conflicts that I feel like a lot of people are gonna latch onto and kind of reciprocate them and go, I went through this at school. So
Mm-hmm.
even though there's that superhero lens being shined on it, there's still something that we all can take and relate to in it.
Yeah, and I think that was the where I really wanted to approach um, Damien as Damien and not Robin. Like it's more about um, who he is, like in like on a deeper level, other than just the superficial. Like I'm a superhero and I go fight crime sometimes. And I think um, in terms of his relationship with Howard, I was just really thinking about friendships that I had when I was a kid, and like how when you're a kid, it's not always easy to like see who you should like. Sometimes you end up being friends with someone way later than you should have been.
Yeah,
Like you like in a way, Damien and Howard, they have so many common interests. They should totally be best friends from the start, but because they're both threatened by each other, um, and they're both dealing with their own kind of issues, like they have this obstacle to overcome in order to become friends. And I think like that's what I was trying to capture, is that kind of um, developing friendships, especially like when you're a new kid at the school or something like that, is more complicated than just I mean, not always, but usually it's more complicated than just showing up and saying hi to the first person you meet, and then you're off to
that's it.
hang out at the
Friends for
park or
life.
something. Yeah.
It was nice to see that kind of gradual progression between their friendship and their relationship, because like you said, they were both threatened by each other, but you could see as it went on their defenses, I guess, lowered ever so slightly as we went through, and it was really nice to see. And like you said, it kind of brought me back to some of the friendships that I built at school, where there was this, we should have been friends a lot later or a lot sooner, but there was this kind of barrier where we were just
Hmm.
wary of each other. There was, almost jealousy, I guess.
Yeah.
And you mentioned Damian Wayne, obviously, because that's Bruce Wayne's son. Um, and in the comics, he's always been a very complex character, and I still feel he is complex in Batman and Robin and Howard. There's still that complexity to him. But was it difficult trying to deconstruct him in a way that suited the story, but also keep the elements that we know as fans?
um it wasn't as hard as maybe I was expecting it to be. I think the way I approached it was just trying to break down like what would Robin's life be like just as a kid. Like what is his life like with Bruce Wayne as his dad, aside from like the superhero side from it. Um and so starting from like this place where everything is grounded, really made it easier to kind of give me a place where I can kind of do, maybe not in a, like an entirely new take of on Damian, but it's almost like, I think with the character in the comics, Robin, like, is always a little more grown up than he is. Like his character is always older than he is in like physical years. And so I kind of wanted to take it back and let him be a kid. And then with Howard coming in, it's kind of like, here's a different influence. And so how would Robin's character grow if he had this other positive influence in his life that he doesn't always get in the comics? Like, and in the comics, it's like it's Batman and Alfred, and then maybe the Teen Titans, and those are like his influences. So just kind of stripping it down and just letting him be like a normal human kid for the story was kind of the entry point for me.
Yeah, it was nice to see Damian kind of interact. There was still that element, because obviously we know him as Robin. There were still those moments where we're like, we're dealing with Robin here. He's the superhero. But it was nice to see him, partake in school activities, football, club projects, group projects, participating in that classroom. And then that's where sort of that kind of rivalry sparked between Howard and Damian.
Mm-hmm.
But it was nice to see kind of a more appropriate side of Damian, where he gets to enjoy school, and to see it through his eyes as well, rather than Batman's. It was a really nice touch. It was a very, very nice story that I thought flowed really nicely. Yeah, no, I had a great time reading it, and that it was nice to see Damian in a new light, for sure. And I think one of the things that really drew me to it as well is, I love your art style, always have done. There's something really endearing about how you kind of make the most threatening of characters like Darth Vader look nice and
Mm-hmm.
welcoming. And I think that's very difficult to do with certain characters. But it really worked well here with someone like Batman, who is very, very threatening and imposing.
Mm-hmm.
But he just looked fun, I guess. And what was it like designing Gotham, with that in mind?
Yeah, I think, like, for me, the great thing about comics is like how well it handles humor and emotion. And so, like, all my comics, those are the two things I'm always trying to express in them, and the art style reflects that. And so with Batman, I kind of kept the gray and blue classic design of his outfit, but like physically, he's not quite so sharp. Like,
Yeah,
he's like, the edges are a little softer and a little, and I think, again, that kind of goes back to portraying him through Damien's eyes, where he sees him like he's this middle-aged dad. He's not quite like, the chiseled physical specimen that he was, 20 years ago in his youth. And so that, I think, is one thing that helped a lot, is just, kind of, I like to keep things a little softer and more bendy visually, even if, the anatomically it's not always exact, and perspective doesn't always line up, but that gives, the art a chance to add to the voice of and the emotion of what's happening in the story.
and kind of crafting your own Batman story, or a story that is set within Batman's universe. Was there any kind of consideration to using classic rogues or other villains or certain characters that you would have liked to have seen?
Yeah, and there's, I mean, like there's such a great cast of characters, but one of the things I think about Batman stories, like anytime the Joker's in the story, the Joker is kind of like becomes the co-main character, right? Like I feel like it's really easy for the villains to take over a story. And so that was something that, I thought about, but every villain I considered, becoming the main villain in the story, um, without, I'm trying to not spoil like any villains or whoever the bad guys might be in the story. But, I like if I was thinking like, oh, maybe it could be the Riddler, but then, like it's like the Riddler just takes over the whole narrative, and the
Yeah.
Joker would just take over the whole narrative. And so it's almost like the real antagonist for Damian is just his, kind of dealing with his own issues, and working through that more than, having like an actual villain to fight against.
Yeah, it was like rather than having that kind of physical presence of a villain, um, it was more that kind of inner battle and that kind of confrontation or um, kind of fight between Howard and Damien that kind of
Mhm.
really kept the story going. And like you said, especially Batman's villains, they do tend to take over. Um, so I think it was great that there wasn't a central focus on that, and it was Damien Howard's story through and through. Um, and looking at Howard, would you like to see more of Howard in the future?
Yeah, yeah. It's funny because um, originally I envisioned this as just a one-off book, and I didn't have any idea of like where they would go from the end of it. But the more now that it's, finally coming out and I'm talking about it, like I'm starting to have more ideas. Like, oh yeah, maybe there is more that I would like to tell with Damien and Howard. And Howard especially is an interesting character because it's fun to kind of introduce um, an entirely new character who isn't familiar with the world, and like, whereas Robin's grown up with Batman and knows everything, and Alfred, knows all the ins and out of the Batcave, and they kind of um, they're all used to it. And then Howard is a character who's kind of encountering this world from, where he's only seen, the pictures in the newspaper, or, heard about these things. And um, so it's kind of fun to work with him that way. So yeah.
Hopefully, yeah. I mean, I think what was interesting about it is, um, especially from kind of, I guess, from an older audience standpoint, is there were so many bits that you could relate to in terms of the school life, and there are so many scenarios that that kids go through in school that I think could really work well with that kind of Howard and Damien kind of spark that they had, the way that they kind of talk to each other, the way they treat each other. And I feel like they, even with the superhero aspect in it, I think there's a lot that could be done with those two. And I hope that people really get attached to them both. Because they have a very sweet and endearing relationship. And yeah, I want people to be able to look at it and go, yeah, this kind of takes me back to school in a weird way.
Yeah, yeah. And I think, I part of part of Batman is nostalgic for me, like going back to reading the comics when I was a kid, or seeing like that when the first Tim Burton Batman movie came out. Um, and so it's a really fits for me as the creator to go back to those school days, because it's kind of like, I don't know, there's like a parallel between me reading Batman comics when I was that age, and then writing about the characters being that age.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I'll round off our chat with just this idea of if you've got anything on at the moment. Are you working towards any other future projects currently?
Yeah, so I'm always working on lots of things. So a couple of things that it's probably way too early to talk about. So I just won't even bother. But yeah, theoretically, I'll be doing another book with DC, and that's just a question of like I had an idea, and but now that I've now that this book is coming out, I've totally rethought like what that idea might be. So we'll see. Yeah, so I'm always
Yeah,
working on new things, and um, yeah, but I did just have a new Star Wars book come out, a Vader Family Sith Myth. So I have the holiday Star Wars book out, and then
perfect.
yeah, there'll be more
Good.
comics coming.
Yeah, I mean, you've tackled Star Wars, you've tackled DC, and there are so many families in DC that could kind of really use that charm and that kind of, like you said, that rounded animation kind of drawings that could really bring them out to younger audiences. And
Mhm.
yeah, I can't wait to see what you've got planned next. Yeah, I'm very, very excited, and I can't wait for people to pick up their own copy of um, Batman, Robin, and Howard.
Yeah, me too. Me too.
So that was I think that was everything I had to ask. So
Great.
thank you so much for taking the time
Yeah,
to
thank you.
dive into it. I had a great time.
Thanks for watching, Super Friends. If you enjoyed this video, then make sure to hit the subscribe button just down below and hit the bell so that you can get notified whenever we release brand new videos. In fact, there's 2 more waiting for you to watch right here below. So what are you waiting for? Why not click play?